My name is Andrew Adams. I'm 38 years old, and I work as an automotive mechanic at a small family shop here in Lincoln, Nebraska. My whole life, I've lived in my family's shadow. While my father, Robert, chased failed business ventures and my younger brother, Kevin, built his career as an insurance broker, I found peace fixing engines and caring for the people who truly mattered. To them, I was the problem child, the rebel who chose to work with his hands instead of pursuing a respectable career. Robert always made it clear that my profession was a disappointment. Kevin, 3 years younger, loved reminding me of his financial successes every time we met. They completely ignored my loyalty and dedication, especially to my mother. If you like stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, subscribe to the channel now. There are 2 new, unreleased stories here every day, and each one is more impactful than the last. I'm a man of few words, focused on work and people who truly deserve my attention. This quiet nature made me practically invisible to Robert and Kevin, but it was exactly what connected me deeply to my mother, Eleanor. She always valued my simplicity and honesty. Everything changed when Eleanor got sick. A cruel degenerative disease that required constant care, 24/7. I didn't hesitate to reorganize my entire life to take care of her. I closed the shop early, spent sleepless nights monitoring her medication, took her to every medical appointment. Robert and Kevin, on the other hand, barely showed up. When they came, their visits lasted 15 minutes at most. Always rushed, always with excuses about important commitments and urgent work. But I noticed something disturbing. Their conversations were always about formalities, paperwork, and, with a frequency that bothered me, Eleanor's life insurance. "Andrew, are you sure all the papers are organized?" Kevin asked during one of his rare visits, while Eleanor slept in the next room. "It's important that everything's in order. You know how it is." "Why are you so worried about that?" I asked, watching his expression. "I just want to make sure there won't be complications later," he replied, avoiding my gaze. "It's family responsibility." Robert was even more direct. One afternoon, while I was helping Eleanor with her medication, he approached me. "This treatment is costing a fortune. Are you sure it's worth prolonging this?" I felt my blood boil, but stayed calm. "She's my mother, Robert. She's our mother." Of course, he said, waving his hand. "I'm just being practical. Her life insurance will cover all these expenses, and there'll still be a good amount left over." Their coldness was a more painful blow than watching Eleanor waste away day by day. I realized their concerns had a very specific focus: money. While I was losing sleep caring for the woman who gave me life, they were calculating the value of her death. One night I overheard Kevin on the phone in the hospital corridor during one of Eleanor's stays. He was speaking quietly, but not quietly enough. "Yes, it's $500,000. No, it won't be much longer from what the doctors said. Of course I'll be able to pay off your debts with that." My suspicion turned into certainty. They weren't just neglecting Eleanor. They were actively waiting for her death, planning how to spend the insurance money before she even passed. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't make scenes. I would just observe, document, and protect what remained of my mother's dignity. As a mechanic, I learned that when an engine has a problem, you don't hit it with a hammer. You investigate, identify the root cause, and act with precision. Eleanor, despite her condition, still had moments of lucidity. In one of those moments, 3 days before her passing, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Andrew, my faithful son," she whispered, "I need you to record something for me. A special message." I picked up my phone without questioning. Eleanor always had her reasons, and I always respected them. As I recorded, her words came out paused but determined. She spoke of love, disappointment, and truths that needed to be told. I didn't know it yet, but that recording would become the most powerful weapon I could have. Eleanor passed on a Tuesday morning peacefully while I held her hand. Her last words were, "Thank you for everything, my son." I knew she was referring to much more than just the medical care. Robert and Kevin arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after I called them. The first thing Kevin did was ask the nurse about the procedures for obtaining the death certificate. Robert wanted to know about the papers that needed to be arranged. "Don't you want even a moment of silence?" I asked, still sitting beside the bed where Eleanor had passed. "Of course we do," Robert replied quickly. "But you know how these bureaucracies are. It's better to resolve it quickly so it doesn't get complicated later." In the following days, they took complete control of the funeral preparations. They chose the most expensive funeral home in town, arguing that Eleanor deserved the best. But I knew it was just a facade to impress the community. Their real interest was in the insurance documents. During this period, I began organizing Eleanor's belongings. That's when I discovered something they didn't know. Besides the main life insurance policy of $500,000, Eleanor maintained a separate savings account with $50,000, in which I was the sole beneficiary. She had done this without telling me, probably foreseeing exactly the situation we were living through. I also found correspondence between Robert and the insurance company, dated 2 months before Eleanor's death. He had made several calls questioning payment deadlines and release procedures. Kevin also had a folder with detailed calculations about how the money would be divided and invested. I found some interesting papers in Mom's room. I casually mentioned to Kevin the day before the funeral. "What kind of papers?" he asked with a sudden interest that was too obvious to be natural. "Bank documents, some bills. Did you know she had a separate savings account?" I saw his face pale slightly. "No, I didn't know. How much? What's the amount?" "Not much, about $50,000, I replied, watching his reaction. "But the strange thing is she put me as the sole beneficiary. I don't understand why she would do that." Kevin forced a smile. "Well, you took care of her until the end. It's fair that you get some compensation." But I noticed he was calculating mentally. For them, $50,000 was lost money. Money that didn't enter the main account of $500,000 they had already divided on paper. That night, I called Marcus Henderson, a lawyer I had met years ago when I fixed his car. Marcus didn't charge for the favors I had done for him over the years, so I asked for advice about the inheritance situation. "Andrew, I'll be straight with you," Marcus said after hearing my story. "If you suspect bad faith, I can make some discreet calls to the insurance company. It's not uncommon for them to investigate beneficiaries when there are signs of excessive financial interest." "Could you do that?" I asked. "It's already done. I'll send an email today alerting them about the situation. If there are any irregularities in the procedures, they'll freeze the payment until they investigate." On the day of the funeral, the chapel was packed. Eleanor was beloved in the community. Especially among the shop customers, she always welcomed warmly when they came to pick up their cars. Robert and Kevin acted like exemplary mourners, receiving condolences and telling stories about how they loved Eleanor. But I noticed their anxiety. Kevin checked his phone constantly, probably waiting for some communication from the insurance company. Robert discreetly talked to people about practical matters that needed to be resolved right after the ceremony. During the wake, they approached me with a proposal. "Andrew," Robert began, putting his hand on my shoulder, "we know you dedicated yourself a lot to your mother. We want you to know we won't forget that." "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I already knew. "About the insurance," Kevin replied quietly. "We're family. When everything is resolved, we'll make sure you receive a fair share, maybe around $50,000–$60,000. Interesting. They were offering me exactly the amount I already had a right to through the savings account. They wanted my gratitude for giving me what was already mine. "That's very generous of you," I replied calmly. "But you don't need to worry about me. I'll be fine." Of course, Robert said quickly. "We just want to make sure there won't be misunderstandings. You know how these legal matters are. It's better to keep everything in the family, without lawyers or unnecessary complications." The threat was clear. They wanted my silence in exchange for crumbs of what they considered entirely theirs. 1 hour before the funeral was to begin, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. The pastor approached me to ask if I would like to say a few words about Eleanor. "Yes," I replied. "Actually, My mother recorded a special message a few days before she passed. She asked for it to be shared with family and friends at the funeral. Robert and Kevin exchanged nervous glances. A message? What kind of message? Kevin asked. Farewell words. Important things she wanted everyone to know. They couldn't object without seeming disrespectful. They reluctantly agreed, but I could see the worry on their faces. They knew Eleanor had discovered their true intentions. I connected my phone to the chapel's sound system. Eleanor's weak but determined voice filled the silent environment. 200 people listened attentively as she spoke about love, family, and disappointment. And then came the part that would change everything. My dear friends and family, Eleanor's voice echoed through the silent chapel. If you're hearing this message, it means my time has come to an end, and my son Andrew has fulfilled my last wish. I watched the faces in the crowd. People leaned forward, moved by hearing the final words of a woman they respected. Robert and Kevin, however, were visibly tense. I want everyone to know that I spent my last months surrounded by a lot of love, but also a lot of disappointment, Eleanor continued. I discovered things about my own family that I wish I had never known. Robert's discomfort was palpable. He fidgeted nervously and looked around as if searching for an exit. My son Andrew dedicated every minute of the last months to my recovery. He slept in uncomfortable chairs at the hospital, closed his shop to take me to appointments, spent his savings on treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. He did this out of love, expecting nothing in return. Murmurs of approval filled the chapel. I maintained my neutral expression, but felt my chest tighten with emotion. But I also discovered that other members of my family had different motivations. I heard conversations I never thought I would hear. About policy values, about how much time I had left, about plans for the money my death would bring. The silence in the chapel was deafening. Robert tried to stand up, but social pressure forced him to remain seated. Kevin's face was red, sweating despite the air conditioning. Robert, my husband, you called the insurance company 3 times in recent weeks asking about release procedures. Kevin, my youngest son, you had already calculated how to invest my life insurance before I even died. Now people were turning to look directly at them. Robert tried to signal for me to stop the recording, but I pretended not to see. I knew I was dying, Eleanor continued, but discovering that my own husband and son were anxiously waiting for that moment, that hurt more than any physical pain I felt. Andrew, stop this, Kevin whispered furiously, but loud enough for several people to hear. Let her finish, I replied calmly. These are our mother's last words. So I want to make it clear to everyone who knew me. My true legacy is not the money from an insurance policy. My legacy is having raised a son like Andrew, who understands that family means caring for each other without calculating the cost. Robert finally stood up. This is a misunderstanding. Eleanor was confused by the medications, but her voice continued. And to Robert and Kevin, who are hearing this message probably furious at being exposed, you lost much more than any amount of money. You lost the opportunity to really know unconditional love. The tension in the chapel was almost physical. People whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disapproval. The reputation Robert and Kevin had built in the community was crumbling in real time. Andrew, Eleanor concluded, protect my true legacy. Don't let greed destroy what's left of this family. When the recording ended, silence lasted for long seconds. Then, slowly, people began approaching me to offer condolences and support. Many expressed admiration for Eleanor's courage in speaking the truth. Robert and Kevin tried to leave discreetly, but were intercepted by several community members who wanted to clarify what they had just heard. This was manipulation, Kevin shouted at me when he finally managed to approach. You put those ideas in her head. Kevin, I replied calmly, I didn't need to put anything in anyone's head. You did that yourselves. You'll pay for this, Robert threatened. We'll contest everything legally. Feel free, I said, handing him a business card. This is my lawyer's contact. He's expecting your call. 2 days after the funeral, I received a call from Marcus. Andrew, I have news about the insurance. The investigation I requested found some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Your family contacted the insurance company several times in recent months, asking very specific questions about deadlines and procedures. This, combined with the evidence you provided, raised red flags. Marcus explained that the insurance company had decided to temporarily suspend payment of the policy while investigating possible signs of inappropriate financial interest from the beneficiaries. "How long will this investigation last?" I asked. "It could take months, and if they find evidence of bad faith or negligence in the insured's care, they might deny payment completely." That same week, Robert showed up at my shop. He was visibly shaken, with deep dark circles and wrinkled clothes. "Andrew, we need to talk," he said with a humility I had never seen in him before. "About what?" I asked, continuing to work on the engine I was fixing. "About what happened at the funeral, about the insurance, about everything." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. "Now you want to talk? Where was this desire to talk when Mom was dying?" "I know I made mistakes," he admitted, "but that doesn't justify what you did. You destroyed our reputation in the entire town." "I didn't destroy anything, Robert. I just let Mom speak." He tried to argue, plead, even threaten, but I knew the power had changed hands. They had lost not only the money they coveted, but also the position of moral superiority they had always claimed in the family. Kevin also tried to approach, offering to share any amount he could recover from the insurance. But it was too late. Their greed had been publicly exposed, and there was no going back. Truth had its own power, and I had simply allowed it to follow its natural course. 6 months after the funeral, the insurance company's investigation came to an end. Marcus called me on a Friday afternoon with the results. "Andrew, I have good news and bad news. The bad news first, the insurance company completely denied payment of the $500,000 policy." "And the good news?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "They considered there was gross negligence in the care of the insured and inappropriate financial interest from the beneficiaries. The report specifically mentions Robert's calls and the calculations found with Kevin. The irony was perfect. Their greed had been so evident that the insurance company itself considered it suspicious. They not only lost the money they coveted, but were also officially recognized as exploiters of their own mother. Robert tried to contest the decision, but discovered that hiring lawyers to fight insurance companies costs a fortune, money he didn't have. Kevin, who had bet all his savings on a risky business counting on the insurance money, saw his investments crumble. Meanwhile, I used Eleanor's $50,000 from the savings account, exactly as she would have wanted. I expanded my shop, hired 2 employees, and implemented a free service program for community seniors. I named the program Project Eleanor, a tribute to the woman who taught me that dignity is worth more than money. The story spread beyond Lincoln. Local newspapers published articles about the mechanic who honored his mother and about the posthumous message that exposed family greed. My shop began receiving customers from neighboring towns, people who wanted to support someone who had demonstrated genuine values. A year after the funeral, Robert lost his house in a foreclosure process. The debts he intended to pay off with Eleanor's insurance accumulated with interest and penalties. He had to move to a small apartment on the other side of town. Kevin lost his insurance broker license after the story reached regulatory agencies. Apparently, a broker who tries to exploit his own family's insurance doesn't inspire client confidence. He now works as a salesperson at a department store, earning a fraction of what he used to make. They tried to reconcile with me several times. Robert showed up last Christmas, talking about rebuilding the family and overcoming differences. Kevin sent messages asking for a second chance and claiming he had learned his lesson. But I learned something important from Eleanor. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and second chances need to be earned through actions, not words. They had their whole lives to truly value family. They chose to value money. "Don't you feel sorry for them?" Sarah asked me, a nurse I met during Eleanor's treatment and started dating a few months later. "I do," I replied honestly, "but I feel more sorry for the opportunity they lost. They could have spent the last months of Mom's life creating precious memories, Instead, they spent it calculating profits. Sarah knew the situation well. As a nurse, she had seen many families destroy themselves over inheritances and insurance. "You did the right thing," she said. "Eleanor would be proud, and I believe she would." Every morning when I open the shop, I look at Eleanor's photo that I put on the wall. She's smiling, wearing the floral apron she always wore when she cooked for me as a child. Under the photo, I placed a plaque. "Eleanor Adams, mother, friend, example of dignity." Customers always ask about the photo. I tell the summarized story, explaining how she taught me that true family is built with care and presence, not financial expectations. Many leave the shop thoughtfully, perhaps reflecting on their own families. 2 years later, I occasionally receive news about Robert and Kevin through mutual acquaintances. Robert works as a janitor in a commercial building. Kevin still lives with his ex-wife, who took him back only because he had nowhere else to go. Both aged rapidly, carrying the weight of their own greed. I, on the other hand, found a peace I didn't know existed. My shop prospers not just financially, but as a center of honesty in the community. Sarah and I are planning to get married next year. She wants the ceremony to be simple, in the same chapel where Eleanor spoke her final truth. Sometimes customers ask me if I regret publicly exposing Robert and Kevin. "Wasn't it too cruel?" they question. "I didn't expose anyone," I always reply. "I just fulfilled my mother's last request." They exposed themselves through their actions. The most powerful revenge isn't the one you plan meticulously. It's the one that happens naturally, when you simply allow truth to follow its course. Robert and Kevin destroyed themselves with their own greed. I just refused to participate in the charade. Eleanor taught me that a person's true legacy isn't in bank accounts or insurance policies. It's in how we treat those we love when no one is watching, and in the courage to defend truth even when it's inconvenient. Today, when I work on a complex engine, I sometimes think about the analogy. Family is like an engine. All parts need to work in harmony. When one part tries to suck more energy than it contributes, the entire engine fails. Robert and Kevin were the defective parts I had to remove so the rest could function. I don't feel anger toward them. I feel gratitude that Eleanor taught me, even in her final moments, that dignity and honesty are the only values that truly matter. And I feel pride in having been able to protect her true legacy. Silent justice is sometimes the most powerful of all, and the best revenge is living well, with a clear conscience of having done the right thing. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and leave your comment telling what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to receive notifications of new stories like this one. Thanks for watching and see you next time.